was a kid, my grandfather used to tell me stories about his youth. He was born in the late 1930s, in a small town where life moved slower and people carried secrets more quietly. He never spoke much about private matters, but one day, we were sitting on the porch watching the sun fade behind the trees. He told me something that stayed with me for years. He said, "In our time, we didn't talk about what we felt or what our bodies wanted. We were told to pray, to work, and to keep quiet." At that moment, I didn't understand what he meant. But as I grew older, I realized he was talking about the silent curiosity that every young person feels, that mix of shame, wonder, and confusion that comes with discovering oneself. Back then, the world was very different. There were no smartphones, no internet, no endless waves of information. Boys grew up surrounded by labor, church bells, and community expectations. The idea of privacy was rare. People lived close to each other. Families were big, and morality was constantly under watch. The line between sin and curiosity was blurry. Many young men, if they had certain urges or thoughts, didn't even have the words to describe them. The human body was a mystery guarded by silence. Some people today assume that boys in the past were pure, innocent, and untouched by temptation. But that's not true. The same blood ran through their veins. They had the same curiosity, the same impulses, the same imagination. The difference was that they lived in a world that didn't allow them to speak of it. There was guilt attached to even thinking about it. In many rural towns, religious sermons painted the human body as a vessel of sin, something that must be restrained. So, what happened when a young boy felt the natural pull of his own biology? Most of them hid it. They buried it under prayer, work, or self-denial. But repression has its own cost. Some of those young men carried a lifetime of guilt over something completely natural. There were stories of boys who confessed to priests, shaking and afraid, for something they didn't even understand. Others tried to cure themselves by fasting, by staying away from other people, or by overworking their bodies in the fields. There was no open discussion, no understanding that this was a part of growing up. My grandfather said that when he was a teenager, he and his friends never spoke of anything like that. They spoke about crops, about the town fair, about sports, and about getting a job. But there was always that silent tension, an unspoken truth. He once told me that some boys became withdrawn, always lost in thought, their eyes heavy with guilt. We didn't have the language for it, he said, so we just called it weakness. When I think about that, I realize how much the world has changed. Today, we have a vocabulary for everything: addiction, compulsion, mental health. We try to understand behavior rather than simply condemn it. But in the past, everything was moralized. If a boy felt urges, it was seen as moral failure. Nobody thought to ask what made those feelings arise, or how loneliness and repression made it worse. There's also another side to it. In the absence of awareness, there was innocence. Boys didn't have the flood of visual stimulation that exists now. They learned about desire from whispers, from life itself, not from screens. That made their curiosity slow-burning and human. They were not addicted in the modern sense, because addiction thrives on excess, on availability. What they had was curiosity without outlet, which sometimes turned into guilt, sometimes into confusion. When I look at the old photographs of young men from those days, standing in black and white, their eyes seem older than their faces. They carried burdens we can barely imagine, of silence, of conformity, of fear, of being bad. They were raised to believe that their own nature was something to fight. Some succeeded, some didn't, and yet, in that struggle, they built discipline, restraint, and a kind of stoic dignity that today feels almost foreign. But let's not romanticize it either. Suppression always leaves scars. Many of those men passed down their shame to their sons unknowingly. They taught them silence, not understanding. They taught them guilt, not self-awareness. So the cycle continued, generation after generation. Men growing up not knowing how to talk about what's natural. Men mistaking self-control for self-hatred. As I think about my grandfather's story, I see how human nature doesn't really change. Only the environment does. The question, were boys addicted in the past, is complicated. They didn't have the means to be addicted the way modern boys can be, but they carried the same restless energy inside. What changed is access, the flood of temptation in today's world. But deep inside, the struggle is the same, to balance curiosity and conscience, desire and discipline. One thing that struck me most in his words was this: we didn't have addiction, we had silence. That silence was their cage, their addiction to denial. They weren't chasing pleasure, they were running from guilt. And maybe that's worse, because addiction, at least, can be seen and treated. But silence, it just eats you from the inside. Sometimes, I imagine what it must have been like, a 16-year-old boy in 1948, lying in bed at night, hearing the radio whisper news of the world, his heart racing with questions he could never ask anyone. No one told him that his thoughts were human, that he wasn't broken, and so he learned to hide, to pretend. Those hidden emotions shaped entire generations of men who later became fathers, grandfathers, men who never really learned what it meant to feel free inside their own skin. It's strange, isn't it? Every generation thinks the next one has gone too far, but every older generation forgets how confused they once were. The difference now is that we talk, we write, we make films, we ask questions. Maybe that's the first step toward breaking the silence that haunted them. When I think of those old stories, I don't feel judgment, only empathy, because behind every act of repression, there was fear. Fear of being seen as sinful, fear of being cast out, fear of being human. My grandfather carried that fear quietly, but his honesty that evening on the porch, that was his way of setting it free. He probably didn't know that, decades later, his words would become a reflection for me about what it means to be human, to be curious, and to seek balance. That night, when I looked at him, the sun had already set. He looked tired, but peaceful. You know, he said, we thought we were doing the right thing, but maybe what we needed was just someone to tell us it was okay to feel. That sentence stayed in my head ever since. And maybe, in some small way, that's the difference between the past and now. Not morality, not temptation, but permission. The permission to be human, to understand ourselves, to talk about what was once unspeakable. And perhaps, in that understanding, lies the cure for both addiction and shame, not in suppression, but in compassion. When I think about boys today, I often wonder if they are freer than before, or if they're trapped in a different kind of cage. One made not of silence, but of noise. Everywhere you look, there's stimulation, screens flashing, promising satisfaction, algorithms, learning your deepest impulses before you even understand them yourself. It's a strange paradox. The older generations were starved for knowledge, and the new generation is drowning in it. Neither seems to find peace in the past. My grandfather's world was built on restraint, a world where desires were suppressed under the weight of morality. Today, it's the opposite. Restraint has become the rebellion. The challenge now isn't finding freedom, it's finding control. I've seen teenage boys scrolling endlessly, not because they want to, but because they can't stop. They're not chasing joy, they're chasing escape. The same emptiness that haunted my grandfather's generation, that unspoken loneliness, has simply changed its costume. When you watch the youth today, you notice something subtle yet profound. They are constantly connected, yet profoundly isolated. There's always Wi-Fi, always a feed, always an image waiting to seduce, entertain, or distract. But behind that bright glow of screens, many of them feel hollow. They laugh in emojis, but sigh in silence. Their eyes are trained to consume, not to reflect. If my grandfather's generation was addicted to silence, Maybe this one is addicted to noise. Every quiet moment feels unbearable. The phone becomes a companion, the algorithm a therapist. But what it feeds them is not comfort. It's craving. And craving, when repeated long enough, becomes the new kind of addiction. I remember once visiting a high school for a workshop on digital well-being. I asked a group of 16-year-olds, when was the last time you sat still, alone, without your phone, and felt okay? They laughed, but not in a mocking way, more like they didn't know how to answer. One boy said, "I can't. When I'm alone, I feel anxious." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. The fear of silence that haunted my grandfather's time has returned, put in a digital disguise. In old days, the shame came from others judging you. Today, the shame comes from judging yourself, from comparing your life to the perfect illusions online. Every scroll is a reminder of what you don't have, who you're not, what you should be. And in that endless comparison, the mind grows tired, restless, desperate for any quick relief. A like, a click, a moment of pleasure. The act itself isn't new. What's new is how easy it's become. Addiction isn't just about pleasure anymore. It's about escape. Escape from loneliness, from expectation, from boredom, from the feeling of not being enough. And the cruel irony is that the escape routes are sold to us as empowerment, as freedom. But true freedom, I've come to realize, is the ability to be still, the power to choose not to escape. I once met an old man who worked as a teacher for 30 years. He told me, in my time, kids used to look outside the window when they were bored. Now they look at their screens. The difference is, outside, they saw life. On screens, they only see reflections of desire. That stayed with me, because he was right. The modern boy doesn't learn from experience. He learns from simulation. Every emotion is pre-packaged, every image designed to trigger. And yet, I can't blame them. They were born into this. The system was built before they could even choose. The apps they use, the games they play, the content they consume, all of it is built to keep them watching, craving, clicking. If my grandfather's guilt was imposed by religion, today's guilt is imposed by algorithms. Both control you, one through fear, the other through pleasure. What fascinates me is how both eras mirror each other in strange ways. The old generation fought the body. The new generation fights the mind. The old one feared temptation. The new one is addicted to it. But beneath both lies the same human truth, the search for meaning. Whether you are repressing your impulses or drowning in them, you are still asking the same question: who am I without them? Sometimes I imagine what it would be like to bring a boy from the 1940s into today's world. He'd probably be shocked, not by the content, but by the loneliness. Because for all our talk about openness, we rarely connect deeply. The conversations are shorter, the attention spans thinner, the emotions more fleeting. And in that fleetingness, addiction thrives. One evening, I sat by the lake and watched a group of teenagers gathered on the shore. They weren't talking much. Each was looking at their own screen, laughing at something private, showing brief flashes of the glow to one another. And I thought, maybe this is what connection has become: parallel solitude. We're all together, but alone in our own digital bubbles. But it's not all bleak. Amid this chaos, there's a quiet awakening too. Some young people are starting to question the cycle. They're reading about dopamine, practicing mindfulness, deleting apps, rediscovering boredom. It's ironic. They're rebelling not by doing more, but by doing less. It's the same kind of rebellion my grandfather once wished he could have had the freedom to be honest with oneself. When I talk to young men now, I tell them about my grandfather, about how he carried guilt over something he couldn't even name. I tell them that guilt doesn't heal. Awareness does. I tell them that desire isn't the enemy. Ignorance is. Because when you understand your impulses, you don't have to be ruled by them. The goal isn't to suppress or indulge, but to integrate, to live in peace with yourself. It's strange how cycles repeat. Every generation swings to the opposite extreme, thinking they're breaking free, only to find themselves trapped again. Different prisons, same chains. The difference lies in whether we can recognize the pattern and step outside it. That's what growth really is. Not denial, not indulgence, but insight. I once heard a psychologist say, "We teach boys how to perform, but not how to pause." That line sums up our world today. We glorify hustle, productivity, pleasure, but rarely stillness. And yet, stillness is where clarity lives. It's where we remember who we are before the noise, before the algorithms, before the expectations. Maybe someday, a boy growing up now will sit with his grandson and tell him a different kind of story. Maybe he'll say, "In our time, we had everything at our fingertips, but we had to learn how to stop." And maybe that grandson will listen, not with confusion, but with understanding. Because the real progress of humanity isn't in what we invent, it's in what we finally understand about ourselves. So, when people ask me if boys today are more addicted than before, I tell them, no, not more, just differently. The tools changed, the access changed, but the human struggle remains. The battle between curiosity and conscience, between hunger and peace, between the outer world and the inner self. It's timeless, and perhaps in that realization, there's hope. Because if we can see the pattern, we can break it. If we can listen to the silence beneath the noise, maybe we can finally learn what generations before us could not. That being human isn't a problem to be fixed, but an experience to be understood. Sometimes, when I walk alone late at night, I think about how strange it is to live between two worlds. One that was built on silence, and the other that's built on noise. I feel like a bridge between my grandfather's time and the present, carrying echoes from both directions. I've heard stories of boys who couldn't speak about what they felt. And I've seen boys today who can't stop speaking, yet neither seems to find peace. And somewhere between those two extremes, I stand, wondering what balance really means. The more I think about it, the more I realize that addiction, whether to pleasure, distraction, or even guilt, is just a symptom of something deeper. Disconnection. Disconnection from our own selves. My grandfather's generation was disconnected by repression. They were told that parts of themselves were sinful, so they buried them. My generation is disconnected by saturation. We've been flooded with so much stimulation that we've lost touch with what's real. Both are ways of losing yourself. One by silence, the other by noise. When I was younger, I thought freedom meant doing whatever I wanted. If I felt an urge, I followed it. If I was bored, I distracted myself. If I was sad, I scrolled until I forgot. It felt like liberation, but it wasn't. It was escape wearing a mask of freedom. Real freedom, I've come to learn, isn't about doing everything. It's about being able to do nothing and still feel whole. That's what my grandfather had, in his own way. Beneath all that silence, he had stillness. Maybe he didn't know how to talk about himself, but he knew how to sit with himself. It took me years to learn that skill, the art of sitting in silence. I remembered the first time I tried to meditate. I couldn't last 2 minutes. My mind raced like a wild horse. Every thought, every image, every desire came rushing in as if they had been waiting for me to finally be quiet. That's when I understood why most people keep themselves busy, not because they love the noise, but because they're afraid of what the silence might reveal. Over time, I began to see patterns in my own behavior. Little rituals of avoidance. The way I'd reach for my phone the moment I felt lonely. The way I distract myself instead of reflecting. The way I chase temporary comfort instead of lasting clarity. And I realized that addiction isn't about weakness. It's about pain. Every addiction begins as an attempt to soothe something deeper, something unspoken. My grandfather's guilt, the modern boy's compulsions, they both come from the same wound. The feeling of being unworthy, unseen, unloved. When that hit me, I began to forgive, not just others, but myself, because you can't heal what you keep judging. For years, I used to blame myself for every bad habit, every distraction, every moment of indulgence. But judgment only deepens the cycle. Compassion breaks it. The moment I began to look at my patterns with curiosity instead of shame, everything started to shift. There was one night that changed everything for me. I was sitting in my room, lights off, phone on silent. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to fill the void. I was trying to understand it. I sat there, breathing, feeling the weight of my thoughts, and somewhere between one breath and the next, I remembered my grandfather's voice. We thought we were doing the right thing. I smiled in the dark. He didn't know it, but his words had become a map, not to his past, but to my own peace. I began to write, not for anyone else, just for myself. I wrote about loneliness, about fear, about the quiet ache that hides beneath our daily routines. I wrote about the world's noise, about how easy it is to mistake constant activity for meaning. The more I wrote, the more I saw that beneath every distraction is a cry for connection with others, but mostly with ourselves. And maybe that's the real story of human evolution. We keep inventing tools to connect, yet the real connection has always been inward. One morning, I went to visit the old house where my grandfather used to live. The porch was gone, the fields were empty, but the air still carried a familiar stillness. I sat on the steps, closed my eyes, and tried to imagine him there, speaking to me again. We didn't have addiction. We had silence. Now I understood the other half of that sentence. Silence wasn't just their cage. It was also their doorway. In the quiet, they found resilience. They endured. And maybe that's something we've lost. We live in a world that teaches us how to seek, not how to stop seeking. Every day, new trends, new advice, new distractions, all promising happiness just one click away. But the truth is, happiness doesn't come from adding more. It comes from subtracting the noise until what's left is real. I started practicing this in small ways, turning off notifications, sitting quietly before sleeping, walking without music, eating without screens. It felt strange at first, almost uncomfortable, but slowly something beautiful happened. The world started to feel alive again. The breeze, the sound of birds, the rhythm of my own heartbeat. Things I had stopped noticing began to return. It was as if life had been whispering all along, waiting for me to listen. And in that listening, I realized something profound. Maybe addiction, whether of the past or the present, isn't about the act itself, but about the absence of presence. When you are fully present, you don't crave escape. You don't need to run. The boys in the past couldn't be present because of guilt. The boys today can't be present because of distraction, but both need the same medicine, awareness. I think that's what my grandfather tried to give me without even knowing. When he shared his story, he wasn't warning me, he was freeing me. He was passing down the lesson he never got to live fully, that understanding ourselves is not a sin, it's salvation. Sometimes I wish I could go back and tell him that I get it now, that I understand the silence he carried, and that I've learned to turn that silence into peace instead of shame. Maybe that's how healing works, not in one lifetime, but across generations. Each one learning what the last COULD in single quotes D. Now, whenever I meet young people struggling with distraction or guilt, I don't tell them to stop. I tell them to slow down, to look at what they're running from, to ask, what am I really seeking? Because behind every craving, there's a need. And when you understand the need, the craving loses its power. The world won't slow down for us. Technology will keep evolving. Desires will keep multiplying. Distractions will keep knocking. But within us, there's always a place untouched by time. The still center of awareness. That's where freedom lives. And so, as I sat there on that old porch, watching the wind move through the trees, I whispered to the empty air, "We're learning, Grandpa. Slowly, but we're learning." The wind seemed to answer back, soft, forgiving, eternal. Maybe that's all we can hope for. Not perfection, not purity, but progress. To take the lessons of silence and the lessons of noise and find a rhythm in between. To live, not as prisoners of guilt or pleasure, but as witnesses of our own humanity. Because at the end of it all, it was never really about addiction. It was about understanding the human heart, its hunger for connection, its fear of loneliness, and its endless search for peace. As the years went by, I began to understand that every generation carries both its own burden and its own blessing. My grandfather's world was built on silence, mine on noise. His struggle was with repression, mine with distraction. And yet, both of us were searching for the same thing: peace. The quiet kind of peace that doesn't depend on what you have or what you do, but on how deeply you understand yourself. There's something sacred about realizing that human beings have always been trying to answer the same questions, century after century. Who am I? What should I do with my desires, my fears, my loneliness? In one era, they sought answers in religion, in another, in science, and now, in technology. But maybe the answer was never in the world. Maybe it was always inside us, waiting for us to stop and listen. I remember one evening, I sat on a hill overlooking the city. The sun was setting, and the skyline glowed with a reflection of 1,000 windows. Each light, I thought, represented a person, each with their own story, their own struggle, their own quiet longing. Somewhere in those rooms were people trying to connect, to understand, to find meaning. And in that moment, I realized that we are all the same story. It's told in different times. Sometimes, when people talk about addiction, to screens, to habits, to emotions, they speak as if it's a moral failure. But what if addiction is simply a message from the soul, saying, you've forgotten yourself. You've lost touch with what makes you human. Every craving is a compass, pointing back to what's missing, not pleasure, but presence. The more I reflected, the more I saw that the real battle isn't between good and bad, or between control and chaos. It's between awareness and unawareness. The moment you become aware, truly aware of what you're doing and why, the compulsion begins to fade. You don't have to fight it. You just have to see it clearly. Awareness transforms everything it touches. That's what I wish my grandfather had known. He lived his whole life trying to fight what he didn't understand. And I think that's what most of us do. We fight shadows. We create enemies out of parts of ourselves that only needed attention, not punishment. If he had lived in a world where he could speak, where he could share his confusion without shame, maybe he would have found peace sooner. And yet, I also realize his silence gave birth to my reflection. His struggle made me curious enough to search for answers. Maybe that's how healing moves through time. One generation breaks, the next one learns, and the one after begins to understand. No pain is wasted if it teaches someone down the line how to live with gentleness. I think often about the boys of today, not just the ones glued to their screens, but the ones who look out the window, wondering who they are becoming. I want to tell them, you are not broken. You are just unfinished. There is no shame in wanting to feel alive. There is no sin in being human. The real mistake is forgetting that everything you seek outside is already inside. Once, I met a young man who told me he felt trapped in his habits, that no matter what he did, he couldn't change. He spoke like my grandfather once did, with the same quiet shame. I told him something simple. You don't have to stop overnight. Just start watching yourself. Don't judge, just observe. Months later, he told me that this one line changed everything. Not because it made his urges disappear, but because it helped him see that he wasn't his urges. He was the one watching them. In that tiny distance, that space between impulse and awareness, is where freedom lives. It's a strange thing, isn't it? The more you try to control life, the more it slips away. But when you stop fighting and start witnessing, everything begins to make sense. That's the lesson. Both silence and noise can teach you to listen, not just to the world, but to yourself. When I think about the future now, I no longer worry about whether the next generation will be addicted or pure. Those are surface level words. What really matters is whether they will learn to understand themselves. Because when you understand, compassion follows. And compassion changes everything: how you treat others, how you treat your body, your mind, your desires, your mistakes. I sometimes imagine my grandfather watching me now, smiling quietly as I sit in meditation, something he never did, but might have understood. I imagine him saying, "You learned to listen, didn't you?" And I would nod and say, "Yes." And I learned that listening is the cure. The world will always oscillate between repression and indulgence, between fear and freedom. That's the rhythm of humanity. But within that rhythm, there's a space of stillness, like the calm inside a storm. And when you find that space, you stop swinging between extremes. You stop being at war with yourself. You become whole. That's the real revolution. Not the kind fought with ideology or invention, but the quiet one inside the human heart. The revolution of awareness. It doesn't make headlines, but it changes destinies. As I look around, I see people waking up slowly. Some are turning off their phones for an hour a day. Some are choosing to walk without music. Some are daring to have real conversations again. These small acts are not trivial. They're sacred. They're the modern form of prayer, not to a God outside, but to the self within. And maybe that's how evolution continues, not just through genes and technology, but through consciousness. My grandfather evolved me by his silence. I will evolve someone else through my awareness. And maybe one day, a child not yet born will grow up in a world where guilt and addiction are replaced by understanding and presence. I can't say if that world will come soon, but I know it's possible. Because every time one person stops and listens, truly listens, the world heals a little dot. So, if there's one thing I've learned through all these stories, it's this. Peace isn't something you find. It's something you remember. It was always there, beneath the noise, beneath the silence, waiting for you to come home. The sun has set again as I sit here, thinking of him, my grandfather, the bridge between what was and what will be. The air is still, the sky turning indigo. I close my eyes and breathe. No guilt, no craving, no shame, just presence. And in that moment, I finally understand. Freedom isn't the absence of desire. It's the absence of resistance to what is dot, everything else. Every addiction, every silence, every story, they were all just steps leading here to this quiet understanding. There came a time when reflection wasn't enough. Understanding was beautiful, yes, but I realized that knowledge without action slowly fades into dust. What good is peace if it never reaches another soul? I had spent so much of my life learning, listening, meditating, but life kept whispering, "Now, go live what you've learned." So, I began to step back into the world, not as a critic or a teacher, but as a witness. I started observing people again, the faces on the subway, quiet sighs in coffee shops, the young students hunched over their phones, eyes tired but alive. I realized something important. Everyone is carrying something unseen. Everyone is fighting some invisible war, some with silence, some with noise, and most with both. One afternoon, I was sitting at a park, watching a father and son playing catch. The boy must have been around 12. He laughed so easily, every throw filled with joy. But what caught my attention wasn't the laughter, it was the father's eyes. They looked tired, distant, as if he was somewhere else entirely. I recognized that look. It was the same look I'd seen in photographs of my grandfather, the look of someone who doesn't know how to rest inside themselves. I wanted to tell that man, you don't have to be perfect. Your child doesn't need perfection. He just needs presence. But of course, I didn't say anything. Some lessons can't be taught with words. They have to be lived. Still, in that moment, I promised myself that whenever I became that man, older, responsible, maybe tired, I wouldn't forget how to be present. Presence became my quiet practice. I started small, eating without checking my phone, walking without music, listening without planning what to say next. These things sound simple, but in a world that thrives on distraction, simplicity is rebellion. The more I practiced, the more I noticed that peace wasn't something you chased. It was what remained when chasing stopped. Around that time, I was invited to speak at a small community center. The topic was digital discipline. Most of the audience were parents worried about their kids, and a few teenagers dragged along reluctantly. I didn't want to sound like a preacher, so I told them my story about my grandfather, about silence, about noise, about what I'd learned sitting in between those worlds. At first, the room was quiet. Then, a boy about 16 raised his hand. "So, what do we do?" he asked. "If everything's designed to keep us addicted, how do we break free?" His voice trembled slightly, not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. I looked at him and saw myself, not the me I am now, but the me who once searched for meaning through endless scrolling and self-doubt. I took a breath and said, "You can't fight the system by hating it. You change it by understanding it. Every time you choose awareness over autopilot, you're already winning." He nodded, and for a moment, the entire room felt still. It was that rare kind of silence, the one that doesn't feel heavy, but alive, like the world holding its breath. That's when I realized that maybe awareness spreads not through speeches, but through presence. When you're deeply present, others can feel it. Even without words, after that day, I started noticing how many people longed for the same thing. Not escape, not entertainment, but connection. Real connection. The kind that doesn't demand, doesn't judge, doesn't fix, just listens. I met people from different walks of life. Teachers, students, parents, artists, all trying in their own ways to find balance in a world of excess. Some practiced mindfulness, some prayed, some painted. It didn't matter how they sought peace. What mattered was that they were seeking it consciously. Sometimes I'd get messages from people who had heard me speak. One woman wrote, "For the first time, I sat with my son for dinner without the TV on. We talked, really talked." Another said, "I turned off my phone for a day. I didn't know silence could feel so alive." These were small victories, but to me, they were revolutions. Through those experiences, I started to understand what healing really means. Healing isn't a destination. It's a relationship between your past and your present, between silence and sound, between guilt and grace. It's not about erasing the pain, but about transforming it into wisdom. I began to see my grandfather's story not as a tragedy, but as a foundation. His silence wasn't failure, it was a seed. And that seed had grown through me into awareness. And perhaps through those I met, it would keep growing. Maybe that's how human evolution truly works. Not through inventions or discoveries, okay? But through emotional intelligence, passed like a quiet inheritance. One evening, I visited his grave. It had been years. The stone was worn, the engraving faded, but I traced the letters with my hand. I didn't say much. Words felt too small. Instead, I stood there in silence, his kind of silence, not mine, and let gratitude speak where language could not. As I left, I noticed a boy nearby, sitting on the grass, lost in thought, his phone beside him, but untouched. For a second, our eyes met. He smiled shyly, and I nodded back. It was a small moment, but it felt significant, like the baton of understanding, quietly passing on to another hand. Walking home that night, I realized something profound. Peace doesn't spread through grand gestures. It spreads through presence, through the quiet example of those who've learned to live awake. And maybe in the vast chaos of the modern world, that's all we need, one conscious person at a time. It's strange how time doesn't just move forward, it circles back. quietly revisiting the places we once left behind. I had thought my journey was complete when I found peace, when I began living with awareness. But peace, I learned, isn't a destination. It's a passage, and life keeps testing what you've learned. See if your understanding can survive the noise of reality. I remember the day everything I believed in was challenged. I had been invited to a conference, The Human Mind in the Digital Age. Psychologists, technologists, thinkers, everyone had gathered to talk about what was happening to our attention, our emotions, our sense of self. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the crowd, hundreds of faces lit by the faint glow of their devices. I paused before saying anything. For a moment, I simply watched them. Some were listening, some were scrolling, some were pretending to do both. And I realized we have become a species terrified of stillness. Silence feels like an interruption, when in truth, it's the foundation of meaning. I began my talk not with facts, but with a story. My grandfather's story. I told them how he lived in a time of repression, where silence was a shield, and how I lived in a time of excess, where silence feels like an absence. I spoke about how both extremes were born from the same fear, the fear of facing oneself. The room grew quiet. Even the screens dimmed, almost respectfully. I said, maybe evolution isn't about inventing smarter machines. Maybe it's about remembering how to be human in a world that keeps forgetting. After the session, a man approached me, middle-aged, sharp suit, eyes tired, but sincere. He said, I run one of the biggest tech companies in the country. What you said hit me hard, but I don't know how to stop. Everything around me demands constant motion. I looked at him and said, you don't need to stop. You just need to pause long enough to remember who's moving. He didn't respond, but his eyes softened as if he understood something deeper than words. That moment reminded me that awareness doesn't spread through arguments, it spreads through recognition. When someone recognizes themselves in your story, something shifts quietly inside them. Later that night, I sat alone in my hotel room, overlooking the city skyline again. The same scene that once made me feel small now felt familiar, like an old friend. Lights flickered like pulses of a living organism. I thought, maybe humanity isn't broken. It's just learning how to carry its own reflection. The next morning, I took a walk through the city before dawn. The streets were empty except for a few early risers, joggers, street cleaners, delivery drivers, everyone moving in their own rhythm. I watched them with a sense of reverence. Each one of them was a world, complex, beautiful, incomplete, and it hit me. Awareness isn't about withdrawing from life. It's about seeing life clearly while you're in it. You don't have to become a monk or a hermit to be free. You can live among noise and still carry silence inside you. Freedom is not running away from the world. It's understanding it so deeply that nothing can shake your peace. I started teaching this idea wherever I went, not as a teacher, but as a fellow traveler. I told people, you can't delete desire, but you can learn to hold it gently. Desire isn't the enemy. It's just energy looking for meaning. The same force that drives addiction can, when understood, drive creation, love, and purpose. One woman once told me, I used to feel guilty about everything, about wanting, about failing, about not being enough. Asked her, who told you you're supposed to be enough for everything? She paused, and tears welled in her eyes. That's when I realized, sometimes healing begins not with answers, but with permission. Permission to be human. The older I grew, the more I saw how guilt has been passed down like an heirloom. Each generation receives it, wears it, and then tries to pretend it fits. But it never does. What if, I thought, we are the generation that chooses not to pass it on? What if we teach the next ones that being human isn't a sin to fix, but a mystery to explore? That thought began to shape my days. I found joy in small things, in watching rain on glass, in helping a stranger carry groceries, in sitting quietly beside someone without speaking. Awareness made everything sacred. Even ordinary moments glowed with quiet beauty. Yet, sometimes, I still struggled. Awareness didn't erase emotion. It just made it visible. There were days when I felt restless, when the noise of the world seeped into my bones. But now, I knew not to resist it. I would sit with it, breathe, and remind myself, this too is part of the rhythm. Even peace has tides. One night, as I walked home through a quiet street, I saw a group of teenagers sitting together on the sidewalk, laughing, passing around a phone. They looked carefree, but there was something hollow in their laughter, like they were performing happiness instead of feeling it. I wanted to sit down beside them and tell them what took me decades to learn, that you don't have to escape your discomfort. You just have to listen to it. Because every shadow in you is trying to show you where the light hasn't reached yet. But I didn't interrupt. Instead, I whispered inside my mind, they'll learn. We all do, eventually. As I kept walking, I thought about how every generation thinks the next one is lost. Maybe they're not lost. Maybe they're just exploring paths we never dared to take. Maybe evolution looks like confusion before it looks like clarity. That night, I sat by my window, the moonlight falling across the floor, and I wrote in my journal, greater than we are not here to escape life, but to awaken within it. The world doesn't need more control. It needs more consciousness. I closed the journal and smiled. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was running from anything, not from the past, not from the future, not even from myself. The silence that once frightened me now felt like home. And maybe that's what all the searching was for. Not to fix something broken, but to remember something whole. The world is quieter at dawn, not because the city sleeps, but because in the early light, everything seems possible again. The empty streets, the glimmering rooftops, the faint hum of life awakening. I stand there, watching the horizon, and I realize that all the years of searching, reflecting, observing, and learning have brought me here to a place where silence and noise, past and present, fear and curiosity, all coexist. It's strange how understanding comes slowly. For decades, I thought clarity was a single revelation, a flash of insight that would solve everything. But life has shown me that clarity is more like a river. It winds, it curves, it disappears into fog, and then reappears. And if you follow it patiently, it leads you home. I think about my grandfather again, the quiet man of a time when silence was a cage. I imagine him smiling, finally at peace, knowing that his struggles were not in vain. He could not have known the modern storms, the endless feeds, the compulsions, the pressures, but he planted seeds of reflection that now bloom through me, and perhaps through others. Generations are never truly separate. We carry each other's lessons, fears, and hopes silently until we recognize them. Walking through the park this morning, I noticed a young boy sitting beneath an oak tree. He was sketching in a notebook, completely absorbed. No screens, no noise, just him and his thoughts. For a moment, I felt the same I once felt as a child. Watching the world without understanding it, but sensing something profound. I realized that innocence isn't lost. It only waits for someone to notice it, to nurture it. There's a paradox in life, that the moments we resist most fiercely, the feelings we hide or judge, are often the ones that teach us the most. My grandfather's guilt, my own restlessness, the distractions of today, all of them were teachers. And slowly, painfully, I have learned to honor them instead of fleeing. I find myself thinking of the countless faces I've encountered. Teenagers, parents, strangers, friends, each one carrying invisible burdens, echoes of generations before them, whispers of what they cannot yet name. I no longer feel the need to fix them. That is not my task. My task is to witness, to show by living example, that awareness, presence, and compassion are possible even amid chaos. Sometimes I hear young people laugh, or cry, or complain about a world that seems overwhelming. I want to tell them, you are not failing. You are learning, and every struggle you endure will one day become a light for someone else. That is the inheritance we can leave behind. Not wealth, not fame, not perfection, but understanding. The quiet knowledge that being human is enough at times. I feel a deep gratitude for the mistakes I made, the distractions I succumbed to, the silence I resisted. They were all steps on the path to awareness. The fear of being human, of feeling, of craving, of faltering is universal. Accepting it is revolutionary. Accepting it allows compassion to grow, and compassion, in turn, heals what silence or noise could never reach. As I sit on a bench, watching the river reflect the rising sun, I notice ripples in the water, small, gentle, continuous. Life is like that. Each action, each thought, each moment of awareness creates ripples beyond our sight. A smile given to a stranger, a conversation held without judgment, a quiet breath taken instead of a hurried escape. These are the forces that ripple through time. They carry lessons, solace, and hope to others in ways we cannot predict. The old fears I once carried, fear of shame, of guilt, of being inadequate, have softened into clarity. I understand that the human heart is not a vessel to be controlled, but a landscape to be explored. Desire, longing, restlessness, curiosity, all are part of the terrain. The journey isn't to eliminate them, but to navigate them with attention, care, and presence. I've remembered teaching a small group once, adults, teenagers, and children mixed together. I didn't tell them what to do. I only asked them to breathe, to notice, to observe themselves without judgment. There was a pause in the room, a rare stillness, and I realized something. Moments like these are the quiet revolutions that shape generations. One person, fully awake, can awaken another, and so it spreads. As the sun climbs higher, I see the city coming alive, not as a threat, but as a canvas. People rushing, laughing, arguing, working, waiting, all threads in the vast tapestry of life. And I smile because I know something fundamental. Nothing can break the inner awareness we cultivate. The storms outside may rage, the noise may persist, but the calm inside remains untouched, eternal. I think of all the boys, those from decades ago, those living today, and those yet to be born. I think of all the human hearts, trembling between curiosity and fear, desire and restraint, silence and noise. And I hope, with all that I am, that each of them will find this: the courage to pause, the courage to notice, the courage to live awake. There's no perfect solution, no utopia, no final answer. But there is understanding. There is compassion. There is presence. And in those three, there is freedom. I take a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs. The world continues, relentless and beautiful. I continue to aware, present, grateful. Each step, each heartbeat, each thought is a choice to live fully. And I choose it again and again for the first time in my life. I feel complete, not because I have mastered anything, but because I have finally learned to witness everything, the past, the present, and the infinite possibilities of the future, without fear, without judgment, and with a quiet, enduring peace. And in that moment, I understand what my grandfather meant all along. We don't inherit perfection. We inherit awareness, and that is enough.